So welcome to Council of Geeks. I am joined tonight by Paul Scavito and Ryan Daly. And tonight we are going to be talking about what we feel is a notable, underrated comic book movie. We've all got our picks. Any volunteers to go first?
I'll dive in. And so I feel like this one's particularly timely because the Batfleck is going to be dropping on us fairly soon. And so I wanted to return to Daredevil.
Oh, yeah.
Admittedly has problems. And I think the majority of those problems lie in the action sequences. They are hard to follow. You can't really tell what's going on.
I think it's mostly editing. I think they went in for the rapid cut thing.
There's a lot that the film gets right. And I think that one of the things that I really enjoyed about that movie was the visualization of what Matt Murdock's power looked like. And that the first time we see it, it's really cool. And we kind of get, like, this is how he sees and how he's so effective. And what this power has sort of become. Because I thought that was a great moment in the movie. I really thought that actually Ben Affleck did a pretty good job with the conflict that Matt Murdock struggles with. The conflict between his worlds of being this man of the law, right, fighting this thing of the law, and having this inherently illegal activity that he's being a part of. I thought that Ben Affleck actually handled that pretty well.
Have you seen the director's cut, the sort of extended cut?
I haven't.
I found myself more interested in that kind of everyday, half legal procedural and half just the detective work of his character by night. The kind of generalness. I like that a little bit more than the overload of other villains and characters with Elektra and Bullseye, and I didn't care about either of them.
Well, this was one that I considered being my one to do because I own it. I do think it's underrated, but I think ultimately the film's biggest sin is that it tries to do too much. They have to cover in some way his origin. Right. Then they do Elektra and Bullseye and Kingpin, and it's
too much.
They tried to cram too much into one movie, which, while a problem, is the mistake that people who care about the material make.
Right.
And for me, what I'm kind of really looking at is Ben's performance in the film and how he owned the character. And I think he really went into it with a lot of heart, and I think he really did try to convey the character as Matt Murdock as carefully as he could. And I'm clinging to this because I really need that to be true in Man of Steel.
Well,
and so
I agree that I don't think Ben Affleck was the problem with Daredevil.
No,
and I don't think he'll be the problem with Superman versus Batman, Dawn of
the Planet of
the Rise of the Planet of the
Super
Justice.
Dawn of the Planet of Apes.
No, I think that's a solid. I think we'll find things to, in all cases, things to maybe rag on these, but in most cases, there's a reason they were somewhat underappreciated. But so for my pick, it's Punisher Warzone.
Oh boy,
and I actually could have gone with either of the two newer Punisher movies because I actually feel they're both underrated. Okay. The reason I'm opting to talk about Warzone is I understand why people didn't like the Thomas Jane Punisher because they felt the character was softened and he wasn't harsh enough, and I understand the criticism. I don't understand what people's problem with Warzone is because they were given exactly the character that everyone said they wanted in the first movie and didn't get. And I think that movie captures so amazingly the tone of the best kind of recent Punisher comic books, which is harsh, gritty, and darkly funny. This is the Garth Ennis Punisher. And it's that very purely put up on screen. Now, I understand why mainstream people didn't go for it. Because it was so harsh that it was too harsh for mainstream. But fans, like comic book lovers, crapped all over this movie. And I will never understand why. Because I think it captures everything that they say they love about the comic and put it on the screen. And nobody went for it.
This is kind of an issue that I have, and I read the Garth Ennis run of the comics and I enjoyed it, but for the most part I found that the Punisher in that story isn't really a character. He doesn't have an arc. He's a very flat character who's almost a force of nature in a sense, who's just retribution. He's just punishment personified. Does that translate into the film?
Yes.
Do you find a character in there?
You do find a character in there, but you can have a character without having a character arc. And another recent example that I would cite as a movie that did that well was Dredd, which was a movie that is actually very much in the same vein and tone as Punisher Warzone, and while not necessarily financially successful, everyone I know who has seen Dredd has loved it, and the fans have embraced it. And again, just makes me go, well, why didn't you also go for this? Because there are characters, actually the character who has an arc, oddly enough, is Jigsaw.
I think that the property is inherently tainted because there have been very poorly received Punishers, and several of them at this point. And I think that there's this almost like gag reflex that sort of comes with. I think people are prejudging the film before they get to it.
I'll just cop it. I just love Ray Stevenson. I would like to see him in everything, every movie ever, and I would be very happy for that. So I'm biased on that note. I'll grant.
I think the next time we see Punisher will be in a Netflix series. Either as a guest star in The Defenders, or as like a secret Easter egg in Daredevil or something like that. Or after, if these are successful, they might give him his own. The movie that I had on the mind was Superman Returns.
Okay.
And I think for a lot of people, it failed to meet their expectations. I think it came out right after Batman Begins, and they were hoping that this would re-energize that property in the same way that Batman Begins did. And it didn't, for a number of reasons. I think first and foremost is that Bryan Singer made a love letter to the Richard Donner films.
Oh, yeah.
It has more homages to those films than actual original ideas, which kills it. And I think that is a serious problem. However, there were three major things that I enjoyed about this movie, especially when I would compare it to something like Man of Steel, which just came out, which is what I heard a lot of people saying. They didn't like Man of Steel, but they would rather watch that than Superman Returns. And I said 1,000 times no. I disagree with that. So primarily the things that I find redeeming about Superman Returns, the things that I find enjoyable if I watched it again, the performances by Brandon Routh and Kevin Spacey.
Oh, God, yeah.
Brandon Routh has moments where it seems like he's channeling Christopher Reeves, but he never feels like he's doing an impression. And I think Kevin Spacey's as Lex Luthor, for a modern depiction of Lex Luthor, the kind of corporate bigwig Lex Luthor, I think Kevin Spacey captures that perfectly. There are two standout action sequences. Obviously the one where Superman is saving the plane from falling after the EMP, and he has to dislodge it from this space shuttle, and we see him saving the day. And it is thrilling, it's action-packed, you see him in all his glory. Later on, towards the end of the film, Metropolis, the city itself, is in danger. He catches people who are falling. He catches like signs and billboards before they crush people. He stops a gas main explosion before it incinerates an entire city block. And watching Man of Steel, I just kept thinking, Superman should have done something about that. There were problems. There weren't enough good ideas in Superman Returns, and there are times when it's boring, which a Superman movie should never be boring, but there are also times when I was like, that feels like Superman, and I never got that from Man of Steel.
The main thing is that it needed editing, because a lot of people complained that there wasn't enough action. But it wasn't that it needed more action scenes injected to it. It needed more of the dead time between them removed, because I think in trying to capture those Richard Donner movies, Bryan Singer didn't always take into account what the limitations of the time were. Because there is a fair amount of downtime, especially in the original Superman movie. But part of the reason there was so much downtime is they couldn't afford and did not have the means to have him flying for the entire movie. You've got the means to do that now. I mean, don't go Man of Steel level crazy with it, but you don't have those limitations. You are not obligated to fill time.
I have to ask that but for Man of Steel, right? Do you think your opinion of this film would be as positive?
I would still see the same problems I saw, and I would still see the same gems that I see in it, because I left the theater with a mostly positive feeling after I saw Superman Returns. Even if I hadn't seen Man of Steel, I would still feel that this was an underrated, or at least a movie with some redemptive qualities.
I mean, if anything, maybe Man of Steel brought it into sharper clarity
Perhaps. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that-
So here's an odd thing, though. As much as I agree with you on pretty much everything you've said, I am glad that it didn't get a sequel. Because, for one specific reason, because of Super Kid.
Well,
Right, that
the
was-
seeds that they were laying for a
Right.
sequel are things that avenues
Right.
I didn't want to go
Right.
down.
Exactly.
None of that
Now,
made me
that
happy.
said, in that movie, I actually really liked it. I really loved that moment where the piano just gets thrown across and you look over and there's the kid and you go, oh crap, and it just dawns on you what that means.
Right.
Unfortunately, where they would have had to go if they ever got a
Right.
second movie,
I didn't want it to go.
yeah, I don't want to see that either. Well, so there you have it. There's our 3 picks for what we consider are some underrated superhero gems. So we've got Superman Returns, we've got Daredevil, we've got Punisher Warzone. There are plenty of other ones out there with better qualities than people give them credit for. So what is your personal favorite underrated comic book movie? Whatever it is, drop something down in the comments and maybe we'll talk about it. But until next time, this council is adjourned.
Oh, I changed my pick.
Howard the Duck?